Who even are you?" The words cracked through the air like a whip, loud and sharp, echoing against the tile and concrete of the City Hall annex. A few heads turned, others stayed down, pretending not to hear. Behind the counter, the clerk's voice cut again, louder this time. "If you don't know how to use the online system, then maybe you shouldn't be here." William Bill Travers stood motionless, the folder in his hand slightly bent where his grip had tightened. His face didn't change, but his eyes blinked twice, slow, deliberate, like trying to clear a fog. His hearing aid buzzed faintly. The sound of a child's game outside drifted in through the window, jarringly cheerful. He said nothing, just stepped forward, gently pulling one of his documents from the folder with a tremor in his hand. The clerk leaned back, scoffing. "You people come in here thinking the world owes you something. I'm not here to babysit a bunch of paperwork from the last century." One of the papers slipped free, a faded copy of his discharge certificate, and fluttered silently to the floor. Bill began to stoop, knees cracking beneath the old bones, but not fast enough. A foot tapped impatiently behind him. A man sighed audibly. A mother bent toward her daughter as the little girl whispered, "Why is that lady yelling at him?" The paper crinkled under his fingers as he picked it up. The fluorescent light above flickered once. A distant flag stirred in the corner, and from the far edge of the crowd, a man in a dark suit shifted his weight and slowly looked up. His eyes didn't blink. He had heard the name before, Travers, and now he was watching. Something was about to change. If you believe every veteran deserves respect, subscribe, because every view helps this message reach those who need it most. That morning began, as it often did, with the whistle of a kettle and the groan of old joints rising from a cot that had served more years than most marriages. Bill Travers stood in his modest senior apartment, framed in the soft gold of a late autumn sun filtering through slatted blinds. His silhouette was tall, even now at 84, though the years had crept into his shoulders, tugging them slightly forward like the weight of all he'd carried had finally asked for its due. He moved with measured purpose, not slow, but considered. At the kitchen counter, he stirred a pot of oatmeal with one hand, while folding a worn white cloth napkin with the other. The kettle released a soft sigh as it came to a boil, and Bill turned down the flame, pouring the water over a solitary tea bag with reverence, as though each morning cup was a ritual honoring time itself. A modest calendar on the fridge marked today's date in red ink. City Hall, 11:30 a.m. hearing. Below it, scribbled in smaller print, "Bring folder." He sat for a moment in silence, letting the spoon rest in the bowl. Across from him, a single framed photo stood on the table, not of a family or loved one, but of his ship from the Korean War, a steel gray vessel surrounded by endless blue. He tapped the corner of the frame twice, not sentimentality, routine. After breakfast, he took out the folder. Manila, creased along the edges, filled with decades of careful records. His discharge certificate, letters from former commanding officers, a copy of the Navy Cross citation, a property tax document with a red stamped error that had led to the appeal hearing today. The mistake was simple, a clerical misprint, but it threatened his subsidized veteran housing. Still, he didn't come today with anger. He came to fix it because it needed fixing. That was the way he had always done things. He ironed his shirt. White, long-sleeved, with faint navy stripes that matched the cap he placed carefully on his head. The cap wasn't part of a uniform, just a weathered navy blue ball cap with U.S. Navy retired embroidered across the front. It didn't demand attention, but it deserved it. As he walked down the hallway toward the elevator, he nodded to a neighbor who didn't look up from their phone. The elevator took longer than usual. Bill pressed the button again, once, then waited. When the doors opened, someone inside immediately hit door close. The metal shut in front of him without pause. Outside, the bus arrived already full. He stepped aboard and stood waiting while the young man in front of him let his earbuds stay in, eyes flicking back impatiently. Bill reached into his coat pocket, slowly pulled out a coin pouch, and counted out exact change. The driver didn't speak, just jerked his thumb toward the back. Bill found a seat by the window and stared out at the neighborhood rolling past. Brick storefronts with faded signs, trees shedding their last leaves, a mother tugging a child across a crosswalk. He didn't expect much of the world anymore, but he still tried to show it respect. That was what a man did, especially when nobody else did. When the bus stopped, he stepped off and walked 2 blocks to City Hall. The wind had picked up slightly. It tugged at the corners of the folder in his arms. His fingers gripped it tighter. At the building's security checkpoint, a young guard waved him through. "Go ahead, sir. Don't take too long, it's pretty backed up today." The man didn't look at him. Bill nodded anyway and passed through the scanner, the faint beep of his belt buckle prompting no more than a dismissive wave. Inside, the lobby was crowded. Lines wound around yellow floor markers. A few monitors flashed information in bold font. "Please use online services when possible." Bill made his way toward the appeals window. It took some time. He didn't mind. He stood in line behind a man loudly complaining about a parking ticket. Another person argued on a phone about a permit deadline. No one acknowledged him. No one had to. But still, as he opened his folder once more to double-check that the citation had the proper documentation clipped to it, he took a breath, let it settle in his chest, and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 5 more. Then the window opened, and the woman on the other side raised her voice without lifting her eyes. And everything began to tilt. The line at the annex had grown. Phones buzzed in pockets, shoes tapped against marble tile, and the buzz of fluorescent lights hummed above them all. But near the front, time had slowed. The air around Bill Travers thickened with discomfort. He stood still, one hand steadying himself on the counter, the other lightly shaking as he tried to lift a single paper from the manila folder. The clerk behind the counter exhaled loudly, her voice sharpening with each word. "Are you serious right now? I said I need the right form, not whatever mess this is." Her fingers flicked against the edge of his discharge certificate, nudging it aside like clutter. "You're wasting everyone's time." A young man near the middle of the line shifted his weight and muttered, "Geez." Someone else looked at the ceiling. The woman standing closest to Bill pulled her toddler a little closer. The child tilted his head, blinking slowly as if trying to understand why a grown-up was being scolded like a child. "I was told to bring these. It's for the appeal, about my housing," Bill said, quiet but firm. He opened his mouth to say more, but the words tangled in his throat. There was an old steadiness in his voice, but it faltered under the harsh light. She scoffed again. "Do you even know what department you're supposed to be in? This isn't a Dropbox for your war stories." Her voice rang louder than necessary. A few heads turned now, and a woman sitting across the lobby squinted toward the commotion. Bill slowly bent to pick up a paper that had slipped from the folder. It was harder than it should have been. His back groaned. His hip clicked. Someone murmured from the back of the line, "What's going on up there?" Another replied under their breath, "Some old vet or something. Clark's losing it." As Bill stood up, his folder caught on the edge of the counter and fell from his hands. It hit the floor with a soft but sharp slap, the papers fluttering outward like spilled feathers. One thin sheet separated from the rest, pale blue, bordered in gold, the ink still crisp though the corners were worn. The clerk leaned over, picked it up, glanced at the title with a blank expression. She read aloud, without care, "Navy Cross." "Oh, please." The words echoed. The sound seemed to suck some of the air from the room. A pause, not long, but sharp, split the space. Even the low murmur of conversation behind them seemed to stall. "You carry this around for pity points?" she asked. "Is this supposed to impress me?" A man further down the line blinked and took a step forward, then stopped. A younger clerk glanced up from her own terminal but said nothing. Bill stood silent, looking down at the certificate in her hands. He didn't reach for it. Not yet. "I served in the United States Navy," he said, the words steady now, though soft. "That's all." "Oh, you served. So have 1,000 other people. Doesn't give you the right to skip protocol or expect special treatment." An older woman nearby muttered to no one in particular. Whatever happened to respect? Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Bill finally reached for the certificate. She let it dangle from her fingers, then dropped it onto the counter. It fluttered slightly before coming to rest. A corner curled upward, catching the light. He picked it up slowly, pressing the edges smooth. His hands shook just slightly, not from anger but something heavier. Not humiliation, but the quiet sting of erosion. It was the kind of moment that didn't come all at once, but in slow pieces, worn by repetition, dulled by familiarity, sharpened by the sheer fact that it still happened. And from the back of the room, a man in a charcoal gray suit had stopped moving. He was watching, his hands folded calmly in front of him. A lapel pin, small, golden, the seal of the city, catching the overhead light. The mayor had not yet spoken, but something in his gaze had shifted. Near the front, a teenage boy who had come in to pay a parking ticket whispered to his friend, "Is that guy someone important?" The friend shrugged. But the room had changed. The line still existed. The desk still stood. But the center of gravity had shifted toward a single man in worn slacks, holding a paper that said more than any argument ever could. And then Bill, still standing tall despite everything, did not speak again. Not yet. He folded the certificate once, gently, like something sacred, and tucked it back into the folder. When he looked up, his eyes were not angry. They were tired, but unwavering. In the corner, unnoticed by most, the mayor moved his hand toward his belt and took a quiet step forward. The wind screamed through the ridgeline like a wild animal, slicing through canvas and skin alike. Snow fell sideways, not in flakes, but in needling gusts that clung to every crease in the uniforms of the men crouched low among the rocks. Night had nearly swallowed the valley, but the muzzle flashes below lit the white terrain in savage bursts of orange. A field radio crackled somewhere beneath the piled rubble of what had once been a forward scout post. William Travers, not yet chief, not yet 84, not yet weathered by years of bureaucracy and indifference, knelt in the snow with blood on his pant leg and a pistol in his hand. 21 years old, Navy petty officer, 3rd class. His mouth tasted like copper, his hands numb through 2 layers of gloves. He pressed his body against a jagged boulder, peering down the slope where 2 younger sailors, boys, really, were pinned behind an overturned sled packed with munitions. One of them was crying. Travers could hear it, even through the wind and mortar thuds. He didn't flinch, he didn't blink. Instead, he adjusted the strap of the radio unit slung across his back and called out into the gale. "Dorsey, keep your head low! I'm coming to you!" A mortar hit a tree nearby. The explosion didn't shake him, not visibly, but it tore away part of his hearing in the left ear. Years later, he would hear whistles where there was only silence. That night, though, he didn't even register the sound loss. He moved. The snow gave way under his boots. He gritted his teeth as his knee twisted, the one that would give him trouble for decades to come, the same one that stiffened when the weather changed, or when he stood too long at the bus stop. But he pushed forward, hands dragging him like claws over ice-slick rocks and frozen earth. The 2 sailors, Hendricks and Dorsey, were barely visible now, only their helmets breaking the snowy outline of death's doorstep. Travers dropped beside them, eyes scanning. Dorsey was bleeding from the chest. Hendricks's face was ghost pale. Travers didn't waste time. He pushed open his pouch, pulled out a morphine syringe, and pressed it into Dorsey's arm. "You're not going out alone," he said quietly, with a voice steadier than he felt. "Not today." He pulled them both, one arm over each shoulder, dragging them by sheer will. His boot soles scraped the frost-glazed rocks. Somewhere above, someone shouted coordinates. Someone else screamed, "Hold the ridge!" Then, another mortar. Closer this time. It sent debris and ice into his face. The world tilted sideways. He felt the sting of shrapnel pierce his thigh, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. They reached the tree line just as the shells shifted further down the valley.
Travers rolled the boys behind a cluster of sandbags, collapsed onto the snow beside them, and laughed once. Short, sharp, breathless. Not from joy, from relief, from pain. He looked at his gloved hands. Blood soaked the edges where fabric met skin. Back at the radio post, a voice buzzed through the receiver. "Travers, report. Travers, come in." He picked up the mic with a trembling hand. "Travers here. 2 men secured. We're still breathing." The transmission clicked. Silence.
Then the faintest reply. "Copy that. Reinforcements inbound." As the wind howled again, Travers rested his head against the trunk of a crooked pine, just for a second, long enough to feel the cold sink into his bones, long enough to memorize the weight of 2 lives against his shoulders, long enough to promise something, not aloud, but deep and sacred. We don't leave anyone behind. Back in the present, Bill's old fingers traced the edge of the same Navy cross. It had been awarded later, after the frostbite set in, and the doctors took half his toes. He didn't talk about it much. Most people had forgotten the cold, but his hands hadn't. They remembered. A hush had fallen. The clerk's words still hung in the air, brittle as glass. "You carry this around for pity?" Her voice no longer carried authority. It grated now, harsh and ill-timed. A few murmurs rose among the waiting crowd, then stilled. And that's when the man in the tailored navy blue suit stepped from the far corner of the lobby. He didn't announce himself. He didn't clear his throat or demand silence. He simply walked forward, polished shoes striking against the tile in slow, measured rhythm. One hand rested lightly on a leather portfolio. The other slid into his coat pocket. It was only as he neared the front desk that someone gasped softly and whispered, "That's Mayor Halford." The clerk blinked. Her face flushed, though she tried to hold her posture. "Sir, I didn't realize you were—" she began. But the mayor raised a hand gently, not in reprimand, but in pause. His eyes were not on her. They were on Bill Travers, who had dropped to one knee again, painstakingly gathering the last of his papers. The folded Navy Cross certificate rested at his side, bent now at one corner. The mayor stooped beside him, ignoring the tension radiating from the desk. Slowly, respectfully, he picked up the citation. "William Travers?" he asked quietly. Bill glanced up, squinting slightly through his bifocals. "Yes, sir." Mayor Halford stood, turned, addressed the clerk, the crowd, the building. "Is there a problem here?" The clerk, her voice quickened now, tried to explain. "He wouldn't follow the intake instructions. I told him. He brought old paperwork and—" The mayor cut in softly, never raising his voice. "This old paperwork," he said, lifting the certificate for all to see, "is a Navy Cross. You know how many men from this town ever received one?" He let the silence speak. It was heavier than scolding. He turned slightly, scanning the room. "Does anyone here know who this man is?" From the back of the line, an older gentleman in a maintenance uniform stepped forward. "That's Travers, Chief Travers. He pulled 3 people out of that courthouse fire back in '82. A woman with a toddler at her hip added, "My dad talked about him all the time. Said he held the line when the ship engine caught fire in '73. The room changed. Eyes met. People whispered, remembered. Connected threads they hadn't known were woven into their own lives." The clerk's face had lost color. She looked not ashamed yet, but unsure, the confidence of her authority bleeding into doubt. The mayor looked to her calmly. "Miss Carter, you asked who he was. You just heard. He's the reason this town has stories to pass down." Then he turned back to Bill. "Mr. Travers, you said you came here to fix a mistake." Bill stood slowly with help from the younger clerk who had come forward. He nodded. "Yes, sir. Just a housing form appeal. They said my paperwork wasn't valid anymore." Mayor Halford smiled, not grandly, but with the quiet force of respect. "Let's sit down together. We'll get it done right. You shouldn't stand in line another day." He extended his hand. Bill took it, and for a moment, The handshake wasn't just official, it was generational. A baton passed not through legislation, but through honor. Behind them, the flag in the corner unfurled slightly under a soft gust from the air vent. People stood still. No applause, just reverence, the kind that doesn't need noise to be heard. The room had stilled into reverence, the way sanctuaries do when something sacred enters unannounced. Mayor Halford motioned gently for Bill to sit, and a city official rolled a chair from behind the counter, placing it just beside the desk, not behind it, not out of the way, but at the center. Bill sank into it slowly, exhaling as if the weight on his shoulders had lightened just enough to breathe again. The documents were gathered now, every page straightened and returned to the manila folder. Another clerk, young and kind-eyed, offered to make copies, her tone apologetic without words. Even the floor seemed quieter beneath her steps. The mayor placed the Navy Cross citation squarely on the desk, smoothing the crease where it had bent. He didn't speak theatrically, didn't grandstand. He merely said, "This building stands because of men like this. We get to have debates here, budgets, staff meetings. Because once out there, men like William Travers chose to stand where no one else could." A soft clapping began near the back. It wasn't loud or urgent. It was hesitant, as if the first man wasn't sure it was allowed. But then another joined, and another, until the sound grew into something unmistakable. Not applause of entertainment, not celebration, but gratitude, rising slowly in volume, filling the tall marble chamber like light filtered through stained glass. Bill didn't stand. He simply adjusted his cap, the brim still sharp from his careful ironing that morning, and nodded once. His eyes shimmered, not with pride, but humility, as though this moment belonged not to him alone, but to many men now gone, whose names lived folded in drawers and etched on stone. A young woman approached from the crowd with a small bundle in her arms. Her infant stirred, but did not cry. She leaned forward slightly, voice just above a whisper. "Thank you for your service." Bill smiled. "Thank you for remembering." Across the desk, the clerk, the one who'd snapped, belittled, and stood proud just minutes ago, remained quiet. Her arms, once crossed in impatience, now hung at her sides, her face flushed with something between discomfort and dawning awareness. But the mayor didn't turn to shame her. He didn't have to. The room had changed, and she stood in it, unable to stop the tide of recognition. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, then steadied. The quiet was not heavy anymore. It was clean, weightless, like the end of a long-held breath. By the door, the mother and child who had first whispered in worry now stood still, the child's small hand waving shyly at Bill. He raised his fingers in return. A simple gesture, no flourish, just kindness. Then someone near the rear of the hall whispered, "It's about time. Let these moments breathe," the story said. And so they did, as if no one wanted to leave, afraid the moment might vanish if they moved too quickly. The next morning, sunlight broke through the eastern windows of City Hall with a golden clarity that had been absent the day before. A new notice hung on the front door, printed cleanly with bold lettering and a simple header. Veterans First Policy. Respect is not optional. Below it, a brief explanation detailed priority services, courtesy training for staff, and the formation of a new liaison role dedicated to veteran assistance. It bore the mayor's signature, as well as a seal pressed with care. Inside, the desk where yesterday's conflict had flared now stood quiet. The clerk who once commanded it with disdain was not present. An official memo circulated later that day. She had been placed on administrative leave pending review. No parade of shame followed, no spectacle, just a stillness, the kind that comes after a long overdue reckoning. A committee met that same afternoon in the main chamber to vote on the mayor's proposed resolution. The commissioning of a memorial wall inside the annex. It would bear the names of local veterans from every branch, every generation. And at the center, etched first among them, William Bill Travers. The vote passed unanimously. The next Sunday's city bulletin led with a photo. Bill, seated on a bench just outside the municipal garden, cap in hand, papers in lap. Behind him, the headline read, "Courage Recalled, the Day the City Remembered." It was a quiet article. No drama, no embellishment, just facts, a bit of history, and a note about the mayor's plan to visit the local Veterans of Foreign Wars post and ask for their input on public service protocols. One of the most shared quotes from the story came from a boy, the same child who'd whispered at the clerk's desk. "He looked like my grandpa," the boy said, but everyone forgot who he was, until someone didn't. Later that week, a local news station aired a brief feature. It included an aerial shot of the municipal building, zooming in on the new signage, before cutting to footage of the mayor placing a hand on Bill's shoulder. The audio was soft but clear. "You didn't come here for attention," the mayor had said, "but this town owes you more than silence." The clip ended with footage of workers measuring the lobby wall, the surface where names would soon be etched. They worked slowly, precisely, as if aware that what they were preparing wasn't just decor. It was memory, made permanent. That evening, the light settled over the town with the hush of a Sunday hymn. The streets quieted as the final echoes of daily life receded. A mailbox shutting, a screen door creaking, the soft rumble of a distant lawnmower trailing off like a sigh. William Bill Travers sat alone on a bench just beyond the entrance of the Veterans Affairs Clinic. He had been there for some time, not waiting for anyone, not expecting anything, just being. The bench faced a wide lawn, where a flagpole rose clean and straight into the dimming sky. The stars and stripes moved gently with the wind, no longer flapping, but rippling like silk, touched by reverence. Bill's shoulders eased as he leaned back slightly, his cap now resting in his lap. The folder, the same manila one that had caused such tension, lay beside him, its contents undisturbed. The Navy Cross certificate was no longer bent. He had flattened it carefully that afternoon, smoothing the creases with his palm until they vanished into memory. A little girl passed on the sidewalk, skipping ahead of her mother. She paused, glanced at Bill, then lifted her small hand in a shy wave. Bill nodded and lifted 2 fingers from his cap's brim in return, not a full salute, just a gesture of grace. She smiled and skipped away, unaware of the weight her wave had lightened. Bill watched the shadows stretch. In the distance, church bells gave a quiet, single chime. One note, nothing more. The sky deepened to bronze, then violet. The breeze grew cooler and ran a soft hand through the nearby hedges. In that hour, there was no crowd, no clerk, no heated voices. Only the soft language of leaves in the wind and the faint thrum of peace. His hands, once calloused from years at sea and cold steel decks, now rested open and still. The world had not reversed the pain of yesterday, nor did it erase the smaller wounds, the dismissals, the wearying indifference. But something had shifted, a curtain drawn back, a truth stepped forward. Bill did not need to be known. He never had. But that day, when the moment finally arrived, they remembered. If stories like this resonate with your heart, like and subscribe for more untold moments of honor and kindness. Let us know where you're watching from, and if this moment brought back memories you carry with you. The best way to honor their memory is to keep listening. Click on the suggested video now, and we'll walk together through another untold chapter of courage and sacrifice.